Well, everybody, it seems the police have gone and done exactly what you would expect them to do based on their history, especially going back to the not so long ago George Floyd protests, and they have served the interests of the right once again by clearing out in a violent manner, of course, arguably a unwarrantedly violent manner, clearing out the students protesting on the UCLA campus. Now, to be fair, there have been somewhat valid-ish seeming reports about, like, violence occurring within the encampment. I do think there's some worth in looking at this situation, like, probably, like, in a year back from now, much like how we look at Chop or Chaz. It reminds me a lot of that. But once again, like, they were protesting a good cause, which is the fact that Israel has been indiscriminately attacking Gaza in such a way that we've now had nearly 36,000 mostly civilian Palestinians die. In a country, by the way, or a place, by the way, where the majority of the population are under 18 years old. They are kids. It's really fucked up. And the fact that I guess these kids didn't protest the right way is how this is being justified. I genuinely don't know. The response from Biden, the school, and the police has not been great. The police have had the worst response. The school have had, I'd argue, the second worst response. And while Biden's response is not outright demonic like some lefties have framed it as, it's not fantastic, and we're definitely going to be criticizing it. You know, I'd give my fair share of praise to Biden. I cover every bill, policy, or big news update that has to do with what a good job Biden is doing. But he's not perfect, and it's time to talk about how not perfect he is. I figure we ought to watch one of the worst outlets to talk about this possible to get, like, the most cringe out of this story. Fox 11 did a 8-minute news thing, like the aftermath of the UCLA protests. Demonstrators released, campus completely cleared out. I imagine the framing of this is going to be god-awful from Fox News, but let's take a look.
An encampment dismantled. Law enforcement in riot gear bring an end to a week-long protest at UCLA. Using flashbangs.
Man, they can't even on Fox frame it as if the police weren't fucking these kids up. You know, like, at least they can't deny that the police were engaging in some pretty extreme measures to clear these kids out. Some pretty violent measures. I'm curious what the justification will be.
And zip ties. Protesters detained one by one. After a 9-hour-long standoff, more than 200 arrested. Free Palestine!
If I'm free, then...
Why is it legal for the cops to zip tie people when they arrest them? Like, zip ties aren't they, like, notoriously dangerous ways of restraining people because of the way that they don't loosen and they cut into your skin? Like, that's the shit the J6 protesters or rioters brought to the Capitol to capture elected representatives. I don't know. I feel like that shouldn't be allowed.
What does that mean if my brothers and sisters in Palestine aren't free?
They're just free Palestine. That's why we're all here. And this is an attack on democratic rights. This is outrageous.
And following the early morning raid, daylight revealed the damage left behind.
A lot of people have tried to pin this damage on the students. I don't really think you get to do that. Had the students been allowed to disperse on their own and they left it like this, I think that would be a fair criticism. But when the police fire rubber bullets and tear gas and charge in and start, like, hitting people with bear spray and nightsticks, and they're, like, pushed out, I don't think you can criticize them for the way they left the campus. Like, you can't. Like, they weren't allowed to clean this up.
Welcome to the Fox 11 News at 5 o'clock now, simulcast on our sister station, Fox 11 Plus. I'm Marla Tejas. Alex Michelson is on assignment.
And I'm Christine Devine. A drastic difference on the UCLA campus from yesterday to today. Here's the latest on the encampment raid early this morning. Just before 3 a.m., hundreds of law enforcement breached and dismantled the pro-Palestine encampment at UCLA. An hour later, the area was cleared. More than 200 people were arrested. They're likely looking at only misdemeanor cases, according to the LA DA, George Gascon.
And just moments ago, UCLA's chancellor spoke publicly for the first time since this entire ordeal began. We have team coverage tonight. Fox 11's Susan Hirasuna will show us the cleanup efforts on campus.
We begin with Matthew Seedorf, who has those new details from the chancellor and some of the arrested protesters.
Notice how the media coverage is going to heavily focus on the damage to the campus, like how much of a cleanup needs to be done, and yet no opportunity could have ever been given in this circumstance to these students to clean up their protest area because of the fact that they were pushed away and made to leave forcibly and in a hurry.
Matthew.
Yeah, Christine, the chancellor says that he
So now it's going to be a framing of look how much of a mess they made.
wanted to give students a chance to express themselves, raise their voices, kind of following the model as Cal Berkeley. But after the violence on Tuesday, he says they changed their mind. Here he is just moments ago.
Mind you, the violence on Tuesday were Zionist counter-protesters attacking the pro-Palestinian protesters with 2x4s. As the police stood, single file, Uvalde style, doing absolutely jack shit nothing, and watching them do this. Mind you, when it was time to raid the encampment, they acted without hesitation or fear. I was part of a pro-Palestine protest, and we did not leave a mess, nor did we get the police called on us. Yeah, I imagine, if the police weren't called and weren't made to do what they did, there wouldn't have been a massive mess left behind. If the students were allowed to protest and, left on their own means, they probably would have taken their shit and left, and they probably wouldn't have left a massive pile of trash, because generally these young college kids, they believe in eco-conservation, and, these are vegans and shit. They're not going to be leaving a giant pile of trash on the campus.
It was clear by yesterday that no solution was really possible, that we couldn't come to any kind of compromise. And our feeling was at this point that...
Well, I mean, the thing they were protesting was the fact that a shitload of students were going to be given unpreferential treatment. Essentially, what they were mainly protesting was the fact that UCLA, I think, was setting up a sister campus in Israel, and Israeli students would be given preferential treatment to all other students, and particularly Palestinian students that are tuition-paying students at the other sister campus in America. So the idea that you can pay tuition to a school and they can have a location in another country where you are actively discriminated against because of how you were born? Not exactly the kind of thing that should fly. Not exactly the kind of thing I want my tuition money going to if I'm a college student, I think.
The encampment simply had to be removed, and the students were told they'd have to vacate, and they could vacate freely, and they could leave without any impact on them. But
how do you leave? Do you think the cops were discriminating between those that were, packing up their stuff and those that were sitting defiantly, refusing to leave and pushing back against them? Or do you think once a couple people started, fighting the cops, inevitably that would happen, all hell broke loose and the cops started going after everybody and there was no opportunity to peacefully leave unless you were running in the stampede? Because that's how these things go. Let's not delude ourselves.
Fortunately, we had to call in the police. Very few students, actually some left immediately. When the police arrived, many of the students that were in the encampment and others left. But there was a residual group that didn't leave, that resisted. Some resisted.
Mind you, if they're leaving in a hurry as the police arrive, how are they supposed to clean everything up and not leave a mess? Once again, all of this is justifying the police action that led to the mess being left behind, and then the mess left behind will be pinned on the protesters.
Police action to remove them, and it led to a number of arrests.
Interesting to hear them explaining their thought process through this for the first time, but very different.
I wonder if they cut him off there before talking about the counter-protesters attacking with the 2x4s, because that doesn't really fit the narrative that... with the implication that the pro-Palestine protesters were the violent ones. I don't believe there was any violence from the UCLA pro-Palestine protesters. I feel like if there was any significant violence towards another person, we wouldn't be able to hear the end of it right now. I feel like I would have seen 100 clips and references to it by now. So I'm guessing it was not significant, or it hasn't been made public yet, maybe?
Hear from what we've been seeing throughout this last week. Now we're hearing from those arrested for the first time. Pro-Palestinian campaign protesters from UCLA now getting released from jail. The demonstrators greeted outside.
Mind you, this is exactly what happened to civil rights protesters in the 1960s. Bernie Sanders himself, as I showed earlier in the stream, but this is a different segment, so I'll show it. Bernie Sanders arrested. Famous image of Bernie Sanders being arrested when he marched with Martin Luther King Jr. back in the civil rights protests in the 1960s. That's Bernie right there. Young 19-year-old Bernie in college getting dragged away by the police. He was arrested. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested numerous times as well. Many of his best writings, such as his letter from Birmingham jail, were written in jail. Because, yeah, a fair amount of law breaking tends to be part of, like, the fact that MLK did a lot of his, like, activism from jail alone is a fact that I don't think enough Americans know about, right? Like, breaking the law is part of activism, whether you like it or not. The law is not a moral line. The law is typically meant to follow our morals, but should not be what we draw our morals on. We have had many, 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 many immoral and impractical, and both, laws throughout history. Just because the government says you must do something or you can't do something does not mean that something is wrong. And I don't think what the majority of these kids were doing was wrong, nor what the kids that were protesting back in the 1960s against segregation was doing were wrong, even if they were arrested. Many of them were arrested, just like these kids, and they're being, like, clapped as they're receiving applause as they leave the police station, just as those protesters in the 1960s did, no doubt.
With food and cheers.
It was for a cause I believed in, and I was surrounded by my fellow students. I'm proud in being arrested tonight.
Early Thursday morning, UCLA police arrested 210 people at the camp for failure to disperse. The large encampment covered the campus's quad almost a week.
I don't see anything unlawful about it. I think we were peaceful.
Late Tuesday night, pro-Israel supporters clashed with encampment demonstrators. At least 15 people injured, some beaten.
I was clubbed 2 times in the head with a wooden 2x4 beam.
This UCLA student...
You know what? I actually fair credit to Fox News for actually giving the mic to some of these kids and not even, like, framing them negatively here, at least in this bit. There was one clip that was like, you can just tell that, like, right-wing media was fishing for more, like, another big, like, r/anti-work Reddit mod interview moment. You know what I mean?
Arrested Thursday morning at the encampment says he had to go to the hospital the night before with a concussion after the violent conflict with counter-protesters.
One side is being really just protective, holding a line, while the other side is coming up and being very aggressive.
You can't define this as peaceful when you're vandalizing school buildings. You're creating a system of apartheid where you allow certain people into half the campus.
Oh, look, they're making the burger while I'm doing...
Cell phone video this week shows protesters block...
Yep, so this is the guy who is an agitator. So this guy has been shown shaking the hands of the police on numerous occasions. There are multiple photos of him shaking cops' hands. The most famous one you'll see handed around is him, like, at the back of a cop's squad car with the trunk open, shaking the cop's hand, like, sitting next to the trunk, like, open trunk of the back of the cop's squad car. It's like more of a squad SUV, like squad van. This guy was just approaching random groups of protesters and asking them to move aside so he can, like, on video, so he can, quote unquote, go to class, but, like, he could just go around them, and he was just recording clips of that to make it look like Jewish students weren't being allowed to get past some blockade that existed that didn't exist. There were no Jewish students being blocked from going anywhere. My favorite clip that came out of this was, there was a point in the protest where things had gotten, like, a lot more calm, like a lot more chill. You know what I mean? Like, people were just kind of sitting down, eating, maybe smoking some weed or something in the tents. No one was really yelling. It was very quiet for a protest, and everyone was sitting down, just catching their breath. And this lady walked up in a shirt, like a blue shirt that had, like, Jew spray painted on it. And she walked up to, like, the border of the protest area and started, like, putting her arms out to, like, yelling, "Jew here! Jew here!" as she, like, turned in circles to, like, point herself at all the protesters, like, trying to bait someone into attacking her, I guess. Like, and she had people recording her, too. Like, she had people, like, that were her friends there to record her, just in case someone attacked her so she could get it on video. And she's, like, walking around the shirt with Jew spray painted on it, just shouting out like a town crier, someone, like, selling hot dogs, "Jew here! Got your Jew here!" Like it was fucking wild, dude. Like she was just, like the people out there trying to bait hate crimes from pro-Palestine protesters are some of the most wacky characters that have come out of this entire story. It's quite funny, if I do say so myself. This guy's one of them.
Blocking a Jewish student from walking through a section of campus. While photos inside the camp show graffiti on buildings and sidewalks, some of it considered offensive towards Jewish people. How do you react to the graffiti inside the camp, even swastikas?
I heard you mention swastikas. I've actually not seen any swastikas. I've seen a lot of the graffiti. We wanted it.
Wow, okay, apparently there have been swastikas drawn on the ground from the looks of those photos, unless like Fox News made it up.
To raise attention to
I guess,
disrupt events because the campus wasn't willing to do anything.
Everybody I protested with would not stand with those actions. Doing such things like that, they're not really for the...
Yeah, I don't think any Nazis are going to be able to openly chant their Nazi shit at this protest. If anything, there were probably people in the crowd that were Nazis, just there to be, like, disruptors. That's always going to be a thing at any protest. But, like, these are not Nazi students. Like, we're literally... Are we actually going to go from these students are too woke, they call everybody Nazis, to they're Nazis and they draw swastikas? Literally back in 2016, the right were arguing that, like, college students drawing swastikas on bathroom stalls wasn't a problem, and that the kids complaining about it and saying there were Nazis at their schools were, like, being too, like, they were asking for safe spaces. That was the narrative. Like, college students, they're being like pussies, and if they're complaining about anti-Semitism and swastikas on walls and graffiti like that, then they need to get over it. But now that they can frame it as being progressive students being the real Nazis, all of a sudden anti-Semitism is a real problem that they care about all of a sudden. Funny.
Movement?
Was there some division between the group on that?
Okay. Okay. I don't think we're...
Well, what happened there? Oh, what?
Movement?
Was there some division between the group?
Because the campus wasn't willing to do anything.
Everybody I protested with would not stand with those actions. Doing such things like that, they're not really for the movement.
Was there some division between the group on that?
Okay. Okay. I don't think we're talking to media anymore.
Dude, I bet that's dishonestly cut too. I bet that's really dishonestly cut to make him look like he's like protecting Nazis in the group or something too.
Interviews cut short by demonstrators covering our camera. The group writing Free Palestine, this time outside the LA jail. And the protest...
It's chalk. That's not graffiti, that's chalk, by the way. Chalk that literally washes away with either a hose or rain.
We met say they never actually spoke with UCLA staff about their demands this entire week. Reporting live tonight, Matthew Seedorf, Fox 11 News.
All right, Matthew, thank you. We have this update now from the LA Mayor, Karen Bass. She says she was at the incident command post at UCLA last night and into this morning. She issued a statement saying every student deserves to be safe and live peacefully on their campus. Harassment, vandalism, and violence have no place at UCLA or anywhere in our city. My office will continue to coordinate closely with local and state law enforcement, area universities, and community leaders to keep campuses safe and peaceful.
And as we mentioned earlier, cleanup efforts at UCLA, they've been ongoing all day long as the quad between Royce Hall and Powell Library is almost back to normal. Fox 11's Susan Hirasuna, she joined us now live 24 hours ago. This was a much different picture.
Well, Marla, from this vantage point, we couldn't even see into the camp because they had basically bolstered their fencing with those tall pieces of plywood. Well, now you see it's pretty much cleaned up, but there's still some graffiti left at Royce Hall. Meantime, other efforts to keep the students out, they will continue. And here's an example of what happened when some students tried to get to this area earlier today.
Let's turn around and say no. The answer is no.
These people found out what happens when you try to get back into the area that was a pro-Palestinian encampment.
Shame on you. All right. Shame on you.
These people find shame. These people found out, like, they were protesters. Literally, nobody actually is in favor of the First Amendment. I don't actually believe anybody who says they love freedom of speech or like big on. I don't think anybody is actually in favor of freedom of speech. Everybody celebrates when those that they don't like are censored. Everybody has standards of what they think should be censored. Most people celebrate if, like, a known pedophile gets banned off of, like, YouTube, for example. Like some, like, Minecraft YouTuber kitty diddler or something gets banned off the platform, everyone celebrates that for the most part, because most people agree that's the kind of content, the type of people even, who deserve to be censored and outright banned and not allowed to have a platform. Everybody agrees with censorship. It's just who needs to be censored and who should have free speech that people disagree on. The right thinks they should have freedom of speech and freedom of consequences, and the left should be restricted. They're quite open about this. They literally refer to any ideas left of theirs as a mind virus that needs to be exterminated. They run on the idea of jailing their running opponents. Like Donald Trump ran on the motto, lock her up, like running on the idea that the second he got into office, he would lock up Hillary in prison, his opponent. The right does not believe in freedom, and certainly not freedom of speech for those that they don't like. And frankly, I'd say most of the left is open about the fact they don't believe in freedom of speech for people that want to use their freedom of speech for hate. The fact is, the left just tends to be more open about the fact that we're not under the delusion, nor do we lie about being free speech absolutists like people on the right do. And then there's the people on the center who are delusionally of the belief that they'll die to defend anyone's right to freedom of speech, and yet here they are, people like Asmongold, defending the police, destroying this protest, you know? So, like, the fact is that it's all about your biases when it comes to who you're in favor of being censored. Everyone's in favor of censorship. The disagreement is on who needs to be censored.
This after a raucous night as police moved in to arrest those who wouldn't leave the area around 3 a.m. With smoke hovering over the camp and the sound of flashbang, LAPD and CHP officers moved in to break down the tents and remove the plywood barriers, all while protesters tried to hold their ground. By daylight, a cleanup effort that required dozens of workers to pick up the tarps and trash. Bulldozers moved in to move the trash into giant bins, eventually filled to the brim. Good Day LA's Gigi Gracia toured the exterior of Royce Hall.
Now all of the walls are either spray painted or chalked with different messages.
The graffiti.
Damn, you could film like a Fallout fan film here.
Will be removed, but will be cleaned, and that takes more time than merely painting over the graffiti that was on the plywood surrounding a scaffold. And then we found this in an area on campus far away from the protest area, including...
Far away from the protest area. Yeah? Yeah, it's almost like if you were anywhere inside of the crowded area where the protesters were, and you tried to draw a fucking swastika on the wall. Like the second I feel like you might be able to get this, but the second you got to here, I think you'd get jumped. Interesting. Far away from the protest area.
A swastika. We tried to get student reaction to the overnight events.
Sense from people what they think about what happened.
Sorry, I got a phone call.
Condition of the campus right now.
No one's talking to press. They know what the deal is. They know what your goal is. They know what your framing is. They see the fox on your microphone. The second they see the big FOX and then the 11 on the microphone, all they need to see is the FOX, and they know they're not talking to your ass.
All right, so multiple barriers still remain up. In fact,
they probably saw that FOX from like 20 feet away and were like, not talking to this bitch.
Area. We had some trouble getting back into this area, so it is clear they're trying to keep any protesters from coming back into the area. But this is a sprawling campus. I did talk to somebody who then refused to be let us use her interview, but she says there are plans. She just is not privy to them, but certainly the campaign pro-Palestinian.
Wait, could those other people not just asked for their not to be used? XOF News, so true.
Campaign is not over here at UCLA. Reporting.
Yeah, no, I think people are going to be, like, on one hand, I feel a lot of the enthusiasm for this issue is definitely, it's a wave, right? It's going to go away eventually, or at least go back to being fractional to where it is now. There was a point, for example, where, like, the majority of Americans were in favor of the BLM protests, and then after the George Floyd stuff became old news, quote unquote, the amount of average American support for the BLM protests dropped substantially, now back to like close to 50-50 levels. across like American opinion. I think that there's this tendency for Americans to have goldfish memory, even like some of the more politically inclined, and this can lead to surprisingly wavering political standards. Where, like, back during the BLM protests, a bunch of people were pro-BLM protests. Now, all of a sudden, they look back at it as rioting in the streets. Really weird shit. And I'm wondering how things are going to switch up here, if we're going to see a broader, like, American, like, dislike of this, if it's going to be looked back at like Chaz, or if it's going to be looked back at, like, or Chaz Chop, whatever you call it, the Seattle, where they took over a couple streets and they made, like, a tent city thing. I wonder if it'll be looked back at the same way as that, where, like, to this day, when I argue with conservatives, I have to, like, explain Chaz and why most of the left does not support that type of stuff, and like, bite that bullet that was cringe, because nobody can be convinced that wasn't. I'm sorry, guys. Good luck. If you want to try that, then you be my guest. But yeah, I'm wondering if it'll be looked back at like Chaz or like the 60s civil rights movement. I'm really curious, because the media is already moving to frame it like Chaz or Chop. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, because every single thumbs up acts as like a little cattle prod to YouTube that pushes my content in the algorithm out to far more people, so I really do appreciate it to every single one of you who supports me that way. And if you haven't already, subscribing and ringing the bell icon to turn on all notifications really helps as well, so YouTube has a higher chance of telling you whenever I go live or upload a new video. And you can also boost my content in the algorithm by commenting down below. It really does help a lot, and of course I really enjoy reading your comments, so tell me what you think of this topic. I really enjoy hearing your comments. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to follow my social medias, all linked down below in the description. And if you want to support me directly, as this is a fully grassroots funded channel, please consider, well, I guess I get YouTube ad revenue and stuff, but you know what I mean. Consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buying merch through Streamlabs, also linked down below in the description. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to join my fan Discord. It's totally free. Join link in the description as well. I do watch parties, like game events, call-in streams, and I announce all my uploads and streams there, so you won't miss anything. So I highly recommend you join there. It's the main hub of my fan base, and it's totally free. And I hope to see you there. And I really hope you enjoyed this video.